Hello and welcome to the Roll and Reflect podcast, the podcast where we bring you insights from behind the tabletop and beyond the box. I'm one of the hosts, Devon. Oh wait, Mark is not here today, so it's just me. But I have a really awesome special co-host for the show. She's a highly motivated and energetic game designer, entrepreneur, Squid Game contestant, and now podcast host, and much more. Welcome to the show, Darylle.
Hi, guys. Great intro.
Thank you. You know, I try my best. I'm really excited to have you on here because there's so much we could talk about. And this topic that we're talking about today is something I am very passionate about. So as soon as you brought it up, I was like, that's it. You know, we could do the other ones, but this is the one that matches both of us very well.
Yeah.
And what are we going to be talking about? Well, we are talking about branding yourself and giving yourself a brand identity and how you can leverage your personal brand to stand out and move forward, not only in the tabletop industry, but in life in general. So that'll be our topic for today. But before we get into it, Scott Nicholson, our good friend, has a reflection question for you to answer in the comments.
Hi there, Scott Nicholson here. I'm a game professor by day and a garden gnome and potter by night. And I've got a reflection question for you. When you're teaching a game and you're coming across something that's complicated, how do you teach it in a way that doesn't overwhelm players? What tips and tricks do you have for others on how they can tackle complex mechanisms in games? Put your answer in the comments below.
Okay, so I'll just jump right in here because I'm pretty sure I know my answer. It's not crazy unique, but it works best for me. When I'm trying to teach a game, I have a group that doesn't listen like at all. So when I'm trying to teach a game, what I do is I just jump right in and I'm like, let's showcase one turn. Like, this is what you're doing on your turn. Don't reference the rule book. I will show them exactly what to do on a turn. And then we'll always have the people that are new. For example, if we have someone that's new, they'll go last. And then the other three people, if they're not new, well, now each of them have their own turn before that new player, so they can easily gauge what they need to do on their turn. What about you?
I would say it's very similar for me too. And I should give context that I mostly play party games. The most complex game I would play is probably Quacks of Quedlinburg or something like that.
So good. Love that game.
so good. But most of them are like really quick games. And so to show a quick demo of the first turn is really fast. And I agree, leaving the new person to do it last makes the most sense because they get the most time to digest it. But I like to even break it up. Like when I'm going through the instructions, I like to break it up into actionable steps per step of instruction. So like the easiest way for me to give context of that, like my most recent game that I put out, which is Tiger Banana Pancake, you're just doing a bunch of crazy moves. And before I even get to the rules, I tell them the actions for the cards. And I'm like, hey, one of the actions is when you have the tiger, you put your paws out and you growl. And they expect me to now tell them what the next move is. But I'm like, hey, let me see you all growl. And like they do it.
Nice.
And I think the piece of that is like getting people actively engaged and actively hooked in before you get through all the dry stuff.
Yeah, are you one of those that teaches the theme and story as well, or do you just dive into mechanisms?
I think I will. I think a lot of the games I play don't have a huge theme. Like it's just
crazy
like
actions and usually.
Well, like okay, for example, another game that I really like is Wandering Towers, and yeah, there's a theme of like wizards getting them into the castle, moving them along the way, but there's not like a huge story to tell with it. It's really like, here are your wizards. You want to get them to the end before everybody else and don't lose track of where they are. I guess that answers the question in a different way. Is like I try to deduce it to the most bare bones to understand what is it that we're doing in one sentence. And then they can wrap their mind around it. Then let's dive into the mechanics. So
yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. So I'm glad you ended with that because I don't usually read crazy storyline that they have because most of my players just don't care. They're just like, let's just dive into the game. Now, it is kind of nice to have that one sentence of like, oh, what are we? Well, we're wizards, you know, in a tower or whatever. Or we're dragons trying to fight each other.
You just made me realize maybe I didn't know how to answer that question because I don't even read it myself.
Well, that answers the question. Don't read the flavor text or the lore or the stories. Just play the game.
That's so funny. Sorry.
I mean, everyone has their own way of teaching. And I think that's why this question is so interesting because I teach very differently than I'm sure you teach. And our games that we play are very different. You know, I'm not a huge party guy and that's like your thing. And so it's really cool to see the contrasting views of how to teach and what kind of player also. You know, you have to think about the audience. Well, what if the audience for party games, their attention span is probably not quite there most of the time? Yeah, really small. So you have to
TikTok
factor that in.
level.
So yeah, I think that's probably the best answer for me is just maybe just do a line, and then those are my things that I do to help teach people. Who are you? We need to know a little bit more about Darylle and your company. Can you give us a little bit of backstory of who you are and how you got into the tabletop industry?
When you said, "Who are you?" I was like, I don't even know.
End of question.
Yeah, so I'm Darylle Johnson. I'm from Vancouver, Canada. For most of my life, I was actually a dancer, hip hop dancer, dance studio owner. I've been an entrepreneur since I was like 16. I got into tabletop games, strangely enough, when I opened my company in 2020 for tabletop games. I had left the dance studio industry. I wanted to live a remote lifestyle. I wanted to sell stuff online. I started learning like Amazon FBA, kind of producing private label products over in China. And my friend / former website designer, he had this idea to make a game, and I'm like, cool, sounds good. Let's make it and let's just sell it online. I was so naive to how all of this stuff worked. In
Just
hindsight, I'm
jumping
like,
right
oh
in.
my god, oh my god.
And then you
Would have done it
realized.
very different. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was my crash course into tabletop games was in 2020. And we launched our first game within like 8 months. We did a Kickstarter, manufactured, got it into hands like really quick. And then learned a lot along the way, and somehow have now found myself like every day immersed in games. Like before this, I had only really played. I was that person that was like Monopoly, Uno, Risk, and those things. And now I'm still like party games. I like indie games and things that you won't necessarily find on every mainstream game shelf.
So you're really into party games. That's your thing. Well, what's your favorite? We have to know that.
My favorite that's not mine?
Yes, that's not yours.
Right now, I don't know if this is considered a party game. I really have been enjoying Forbidden Island.
I wouldn't consider a party game, but it's a really good game.
I think I like making party games. I like making social media content for party games. I find it easy to manufacture the feeling of a party game, that target market in my whole past. So like I can make that stuff. But when I'm hanging out with my friends, I like to play anything from, like I said, Quacks to Forbidden Island and that sort of stuff. So like kind of strategy, but not, I don't think it's high level.
Not so hard that you're thinking about every turn for 12 minutes.
Yeah, I don't want to do that.
That's really interesting because I know like you kind of, like you said, you jumped in right head first into the Kickstarter world, and you know there was a lot of factors that you weren't thinking about at the time. And now I'm sure you've learned so much, kind of a little bit outside of this, but if you were to do it differently, what would you do today differently?
Way more product research, just way more market research, product research, understanding what it means when you have a good game. Because there's a really good book called The Mom Test, and I recommend every single person that's manufacturing any product read that book. But essentially, if I were to sum it up in like 1 or 2 sentences, is people don't really like to give bad feedback, especially if they know you. And usually you should not get feedback from people that know you, because I think that people who know you, like oftentimes they want to make you feel good. They want to make you feel validated, and that's coming from a good place, but I don't think it's a helpful place. And so unless if you're really, really, really good at digging into it and being able to kind of feel it out and ask the right questions and know, I wouldn't ask people who you know for product advice. Unless if you know that they are literally the right target market for that game and you know that you can get the honest advice from them. Also, asking the right people. So if you ask a like high-level strategy person for advice on a 5-minute party game, you might get some good advice. You might get a lot of irrelevant advice. And if you haven't done that a lot, you won't know how to sift and sort what is actually applicable. Like, what should I actually apply to this? And it's called the mom test because it's really like your mom always wants to pat you on the back for a good job, but she won't actually tell you like, hey, Darylle, you're doing this wrong. Like if you just did this thing, you would have this result. So that would be one of my 2 biggest reflections of doing things differently. And the other one would be, do not over anticipate how much inventory you need without the evidence. I think out of probably most, if not all, people who have over ordered in the indie space, I think I was one of those people, because my idea of how much inventory we needed was correlated with the private label FBA space, where you're manufacturing things that people are already buying. So you're getting thousands of something because thousands are already selling. But when you invent something, you need 1 sale, and then you need 5 sales, and then you need 10 sales, and so forth. You're not starting with like several thousands
Yeah.
of units. I think that Kickstarter can be a very, very false identifier of how successful your business model will be, because there can be a lot of hype if you're good at social media, you're good at personal branding, you're good at just hyping stuff up. And then you will be like, okay, well, we made this much at this time of year. Christmas is coming. We should probably triple that. You shouldn't.
That's not right.
So those are my 2 biggest reflections. I could talk a lot on those, but I know that's not the topic of today. So
that is a different topic entirely. But I mean, it kind of leans itself really well because you talked about hyping things. Well, that's a good transition. Let's talk about personal brands. Let's talk about, what does that mean to have a personal brand or be a personal brand?
I mean, okay, everybody's probably going to have a different definition, but I like to just circle back to like marketing as a business as a whole. And when you start making a business, you really need to hone down to like, what are your values? What's your mission statement? What's your vision? What's the colors? What's the aesthetic? All of that. And all of those things are not the brand, but all of those things help create what people feel when they interact with the brand. So like your values are how you make your decisions. So if our number one value is fun, which it is for my company, then when people interact with me, I would hope that they have a fun time. And then if, let's say, like another value is trust. You want to trust others, you want to be trustworthy, then like that would be emulated in your brand. I just think it's the way you make people feel.
Yeah, I think for me, it definitely is part of that. You got to think about it goes past the individual, right? A brand is not just me. Like, for example, Board Game Hype. It's not just me, but it's the way I want to be perceived. It's the way people see this logo and be like, what does that represent? It doesn't, I mean, okay, it represents the glasses, me. I mean, yeah. But on top of that, I am energetic. I'm always willing to be helping other people. Like that's part of my brand. And then just like the brand itself, we're all a collective, love to unify people. And like that's the goal of Board Game Hype. And you're thinking about it as a bigger vision as opposed to a personal brand is, it's sometimes a little tough to identify how much personal and how much of a, company it is, right?
Yeah, big time. And I think you touched on like 2 important parts there. So one of them being, like the glasses and let's say the blue and the yellow. These are aesthetic things that make people remember, like they can tie it together. Like the blue and the yellow and the glasses don't make them feel a certain way. But I would say personally, knowing you throughout the years, when I think of you, I think of a community that is like involved and people are genuine. And I don't think about that every community that way, but you have managed to build that. And so whether that's a brand and that's something that you build within all of the people in the brand, or it's something that you convey as yourself within the brand of it and your personal brand, so I'm saying the same word a lot, it is all important and it does all come together. And then you had mentioned also about personal brand versus company brand. I feel like company brand it's still relevant. It's still important. But there was a day where it was the only thing. And now with social media and the internet and just the way things are, I think personal brand is becoming more and more important. And I think I'm jumping a little bit ahead of the gun here, but a company that I like to refer to a lot is called, they're not in the board game space. They're in the chocolate bar space, but they're called Midday Squares. And that's owned by 3 people. There's a brother, a sister, and a husband. And they're like Canada's fastest growing chocolate bar company. And they do a lot of behind the scenes marketing. It's called build in public. That's the style of marketing, where they will authentically and genuinely share their struggles, their stories on a very personal level. Like if they get a bad review, they won't go on and like slander the bad review. They'll be like, this is how we dealt with it. And you can see how they're doing stuff behind the scenes as a multi-million-dollar company. They're really silly. They've made a music video before. Like Hershey's tried to sue them, and then they made a snapback video doing a music video against Hershey. Like they're just funny.
That's great.
And so they're kind of amalgamating like all three of their personal brands into this corporate brand. And I think that's kind of the way that things are moving. And I've also seen a trajectory of personal brands on like TikTok and Instagram throughout the years launching their own products. And I believe that we're already getting there now, but I think it's going to grow more and more where the way to launch a brand is by launching the way to launch a product is by launching a personal brand and grow from there. Because people are so tired of being advertised to. They're so tired of corporate talk. They want to talk to humans. Like guaranteed, my personal opinion, guaranteed, if you launched a product tomorrow, which you already have, and you had a company page and you had a Devon page, I just think this would grow at least 2 times faster because people want to connect.
I mean, like in this, the 2024 is influencer marketing is absolutely huge. And like TikTok, there's a reason TikTok boomed the way it did, because everyone on TikTok is their personal brand, right? Like
yes.
You think about how you talked about being real. And I think that's why TikTok works so well, because we're getting to see such raw content that you never would see in the normal media, but giving the power to personal brand to really make their own media. Well, now we're seeing all sorts of crazy things, like learning so much. Obviously there's a side of TikTok that's just like annoying. There's a side of TikTok that's just like scrolling and that's it. But the fact that this type of marketing is how you have to promote yourself today makes it, one, easy to just do it, because you could just pick up your phone now and just make content. Like there's not really an excuse anymore to make content. Yeah. And I think that's a big deal, because back in the day, I'm not that old, but back in the day, I feel like the barriers were so much harder to get into, and we're making it a lot easier now, I think.
Yeah. Well, like before it was radio ads and TV ads and like your website was your website, and it was you can change it, but it's very stagnant. Now, while those are still available, it's more like your website people visit the least, and your Instagram is kind of your new website, but it's constantly changing. And your TikTok is like, here's the real you. When I think of TikTok, I think of somebody like telling a little story in the bathroom while nobody's looking. You know what I mean? Whereas when I think of Instagram, I think of like kind of curated content. It's planned. It's more thought through. And when I think of a website, it's like a billboard. Yeah. And so there's these different layers to it all. And I think that the personal brand is where you can really shine through on platforms like TikTok. You can too on Instagram and YouTube and stuff. But
it's a little bit easier on TikTok just because of how authentic it really is. Like you can just pick up your phone and be like, boom. Yeah. We kind of touched on this a little bit. What would you consider are the key elements of a strong personal brand? Not necessarily in the tabletop industry, but in general. And then let's dial it back to tabletop.
Well, I heard something years ago that really resonated with me, but they're like, so-and-so, how do you not burn out? You're doing something constantly. And they're like, because I've never tried to be anybody but myself. I'm never showing up with a mask on. I'm always just being me. I'm like, shoot. Like when I had my dance studio, I always had to like be happy. And I'm not always happy. Like sometimes I just don't want to talk to people. But in that environment, like you're facilitating a community with hundreds of people constantly, literally right in front of your face. You can't shut the screen off. Like they're right there. And not only that, but it's a family environment. You can't swear. And like, I do swear. I have a bit of a potty mouth. I won't on here. And I had to kind of be a different version of myself. It wasn't like it wasn't me. It was just a very, very compartmentalized version of me. And I became very burnt out. And so like that was something that I became very cognizant about with games and with my social media, was like, even if some people don't like me because of the way that I talk and who I am, I'm just going to be authentically me because I can sustain that and it feels good. And I think that a lot of people can read that, whether like they consciously or subconsciously read it. I think somebody who's being authentic will never have to like think back. Is that what I said? They'll never have to think, am I doing it right? You're just being you. It's just maybe amplified. Yeah, so that's one thing. Authenticity like really goes a long way, especially in a world where we're being sold to so much. So just being really just like humbling it down to just being a person and being relatable. I think aesthetics are important. I haven't really like done anything crazy to be like, oh yeah, the girl with like the purple hair. I'm more like the girl that like she might move to Mexico tomorrow or she might not.
Yeah.
There is something to be said about the visual aesthetic. Like you have your brand colors. I think of like Grant with the blue. There's a girl in astrology, Marion Altman, and she has bright red hair, the color of your glasses, and she only wears red. She doesn't. You will never catch her wearing green. Never gonna happen. Maybe in her pajamas when she's not recording, but I've followed her for like 3 or 4 years now, and I've only seen her wear red. Clearly that sticks out because when we're talking about personal brands, like she's one of a couple people that I brought up right now, but like the aesthetic without the feeling and the connection, I don't think matters. I think the connection comes first.
I think also identifying your purpose right away is almost as crucial as following up with your brand, right? Because you need to know, like before I started Board Game Hype, I was like, what do I want to do? Like, why would I even create a brand? How do I want to do this? Well, my purpose was to help others in the tabletop industry. Like that was my mission statement. That was my purpose. I just got goosebumps. So, I mean, that says something.
That means you're on track.
Yeah, that was why I wanted to start it in the first place. You know, like you're talking about aesthetic. And then I was like, okay, well, now I have my purpose. Now I know what to do. Now, how can people see me? How can I be known? And that's where the whole glasses thing came. It's a silly thing, but like that's how people know me. It makes it memorable.
I think what you're saying and what I said, both are like, you got to choose one. You can do both, but you got to choose one. Because I don't want to discourage somebody who's like, hey, I want to create a personal brand, but I don't really know what I want to do yet. That's fine. Like pick something that you can continue to be authentic about and test and try and just practice doing the reps of putting yourself out there and it will come along. I don't think you have to have it all figured out to start running because I think we can get into analysis paralysis with that. But if you can figure out the purpose, like absolutely, that will fast track it. Absolutely.
Personal brand for like, I'm speaking on behalf of game designers right now. I know there's a lot of game designers out there that they're so good, but they're not necessarily, on social doing all the things to try and become known. I do want to name drop someone here. And I know Andrew Styles is one of those guys that I just love him. He's a great game designer and he doesn't necessarily have a logo or anything like that, but he is so integrated into the community and he does such a good job, not only in person, but on digital, identifying I'm a personal brand. I am Andrew Styles, podcast host, game designer, and I want to help you with your game. I want to pitch you my game. Like he's very good at that. I want more game designers to understand how to do that. And so that's why I really wanted to do this podcast because I think it's crucial for game designers as well.
I think what you just said is very, very important to touch on. You don't have to be good at social media to be good at building a personal brand. Technically, I would say it's better to have social media, but you actually don't even need to dial in on social media to have a personal brand. I know plenty of people, everybody knows, but they don't post. It's more like, what are you good at? And lean into what you're good at. I think we live in this society where everybody's like, become good at everything or strengthen where you're not good at and like fix your flaws. What if we just figured out what we are good at and just dial in on that and just get 10 times better at that? Like, what if you're just really good at in-person relationships and you have a way of building your personal brand and your network from those in-person relationships to the degree that they talk about you? It's still the network effect. It's just not with digital media or it's indirect. So I'm definitely about making more digital content, but I wouldn't say that there's like only one path forward.
Yeah, and that's the best part about branding itself is there's a lot of directions you can go. I mean, you can go with hey, I'm a game designer. Like I'm the guy that talks to everyone. I don't have crazy outfit or anything. I'm always there at the top of everyone's mind because I'm always there, right? Like that's kind of my thing. And that's my personal brand. It doesn't have to have a fancy logo behind it. It doesn't have to have a big following on social media. That's just how you're being known with your brand. And I think, it's great to
Yeah.
have different paths forward. I'd like to know about your personal brand. Like, what would you consider your personal brand is? And then, like, what steps have you taken to ensure it's resonated with the people that you're trying to target with your games and your lifestyle?
Yeah, I definitely would not say that it came from an intentional place. I was building the game company, and when we launched our game came to market in 2021, I realized, holy crap, it's really expensive to pay for influencer marketing. And I will do that, but like, can I do it too? Can I become
Right?
an influencer? And so it was never like, I want to be an influencer, and I'm not. Like, I definitely do not think of myself that way at all. But it was at that point, it was an intentional choice to like just put myself out there more and just have more omnipresence, as many channels as I could manage, through a method of just being vulnerable and being open and like sharing the tough times. I don't really have a whole lot of shame around sharing my struggles, because I think everybody has struggles, and withholding them and not sharing them doesn't help anybody. The more that I can share, hey, I'm really struggling with this. Like, I lost a lot of money on my first game, or I'm still working in the restaurant industry and an account manager and doing these things to build my company, even though I'm in our games in many stores across the world, even though we're with many distributors, even though we're doing all this stuff, I'm still doing these things. Like, I think being raw and being vulnerable and sharing the reality behind your story, like, really resonates with people, and I wanted to do that. I'm just like not overly afraid of being judged, I guess.
That's why I wanted you on, because I'm the same way. Like, I will post something and be like, I don't really care what you guys think about this, or
Yeah.
my outfits, I don't really care. The glasses, I
Yeah.
don't care. This is
Yeah.
me, and take it or
Because
leave
there's
it.
a value. There's a
Yeah.
value behind it. Like my thing is, at the end of my life, literally when I die and I'm on my deathbed, whatever that looks like, whether it's soon or later, I don't want any regrets of what I didn't do. I'm okay with having regrets of what I did do, because like at least I tried, but I don't want to be like, damn, I wish I did that thing. I should have done that thing, but I didn't do that thing because I was scared. And I
Right.
would say that stems because I was scared most of my life. Like, as a child, I was practically a mute. Like, I wouldn't talk to anybody. I was afraid of everything. I was shy, so much social anxiety, and it felt awful. I hated my life. I hated myself, and I didn't want to feel that anyway. So like incrementally, I just did things over a number of years to just put myself out there, and it got to the point of realizing, oh, it's not so bad. Oh, it's not so bad. It's not so bad, until it's like, honestly, nothing's really that bad. Like, it feels better by just being authentic. So I think having a vision of what you want to lead with is really, really important. And I think that transcends games and business too.
I think what you said with fear is a pretty strong word, because having a personal brand, it is something that you have to get over that fear. Like, sometimes you might not be as extroverted as the next person, right? Like, I am extremely out there. We're both very extroverted, and that, like, our personal brands, we kind of went over that fear pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of my friends and stuff that they have their personal brand, but they're scared to put themselves out there. And I think because of that, they're not able to reach their full potential. And so as part of my personal brand, I want to help them lift themselves up and realize that, hey, I am a person that has an amazing brand. I'm an amazing designer. I'm an amazing person. Post something, here and there. Talk to this publisher, email them, send them a message. It's not that hard. Like, that's what I've done when I'm pitching games, is I've literally, sometimes I've sent a Facebook message, and that was totally acceptable. I just said, hey, they're going to just say no, and that's okay. But at least I tried. Yeah, just carry on and move forward. And I think fear is something that's holding us back. And I think
it's just the reps. Like, literally the first time you go to the gym, guess what? You're going to be like a gooey, mushy bunch of non-muscle. And it's literally going to be the same thing the 10th time you go. But by the 30th time you go, you're probably going to feel something. And you just have to do the reps. Like, I reached out to somebody on Facebook maybe a month ago. I was like, hey, so-and-so, found you on Facebook. Not these exact words, but just wanted to let you know about my game. We just came to market. Blah, blah, blah. Shoot my shot. And he was kind of upset. He's like, this is not how I want to conduct myself on Facebook. I'm like, no problem. I'm sorry. Like, I was like, I'm sorry. Like, I didn't mean to overstep. I won't do it again. But guess what? Like, we're cool. We're friends on Facebook now. I won't do it again. And then there's other people that you shoot your shot with, and they're like, oh my God, I love this game. Like, thanks for letting me know. And I'll send them a free demo copy. It's sales. And I think the key to success in any business is being able to sell. And the first part of being able to sell is being able to sell yourself. Personal brand is being able to sell yourself.
It's definitely something that I've had to learn. We've all made mistakes, right? Like early on, and I've been here probably 5 years now in the industry. And early on, that first year was a bit rough. I dove in head first, but I didn't know how to sell myself correctly. I didn't know how to sell other people's games correctly. And so I was doing the spam stuff, like, because I didn't know what I was doing, right? And so I was like posting in groups, sharing the same thing multiple times and reaching out to them in the wrong ways. I'm just like, I had to learn so much over time. And now today I'm like super confident in selling myself and my games just because I've had to learn, and I've failed and now I succeeded.
I think that's something that ties really, really closely to tabletop games specifically. And it will be similar in other industries too, but let's just speak to tabletop games. Personal relationships in this industry is super important. And I think personal relationships and personal brand is like side by side in this industry. Like, you cannot just cold ask. You can, but trust me, people,
it's not going to get anywhere.
It's hard. That's an uphill battle. You can do it, but it's an uphill battle. You're going to do a lot of calling and I've done it. I've sat for hours cold calling stores. Will you buy my game? I don't say it like that, but like learning sales strategies, how to get past the gatekeeper. Because when you call a store, it's usually not the owner. And they're like, oh, the owner's not in. The owner's in. Like,
they just don't want to listen to
the gatekeeper, right? and so I'm like, cool. At least I learned those skills. Because I didn't have the skill of knowing how to build the relationships, but I think in this industry, it's relationships, at least to get your foot in the door. If you have a crappy, if you have a crappy game or an okay game, relationships can only get you so far. They might get you the first sale. You still need a really good game to get the second sale and the third one or the fourth one. Personal brand and personal relationships is like hand in hand in this industry.
Yeah, this industry is so tight knit. I've seen some people do really good things, but then say one wrong thing or do one thing they didn't mean to do, and then their career was over. And so it's like, it's a really fragile industry because we're all so tight knit. I feel like everyone kind of knows each other, and relationships are pretty much crucial. Like getting to conventions, even for me, it was so hard to do because you're not going to cold email usually be able to get in. If you reach out to this one person, maybe help play test their game. Maybe now they are going to connect you with someone else, and that's a publisher who will may side your game. And
it will just spiral from that. Like, that's what happened. I went to Gamma this year, and so I live in Vancouver, and one of the popular game stores out here is called Rain City. I had known about them. They stocked my first game for like one round, and I went in there and to drop off our latest game, Tiger and Pancake, and as a demo. And the owner, Andrea, she's like, "Are you going to go to Gamma?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm actually going to Gamma. It's my first board game convention since opening the company years ago." And she's like, "Oh, awesome! Like, I'll see you there." We weren't friends; like, we just met. I actually, ironically, ran into her on the first couple hours of arriving there, and her and her husband started introducing me to people because they knew that even though I'm like, I can turn it on and be outgoing, I'm actually really introverted, but I know how to turn it on and go. And so they started introducing me to people, and like that helped. But then when I was in one of the seminars, there was a guy sitting beside me. The seminar was for game designers and indie publishers to learn how to sell to retail stores, which is super hard. And so in the seminar, if I were to sum up the hour or however 45 minutes, it was like, okay, so should we call? No. Should we email? No. Should we walk in? No. What should we do? I don't know. Like, that was kind of how it was. And that is how it is, honestly. Like, there's some who will answer. There's some who will reply, but like more often than not, it's actually really hard to get through. And there's a reason for that because 7,000 games come out every year. I feel the pain. Running a small business is hard. Dealing with that on top of it, no way. So I get it. The guy sitting beside me, him and I were just like laughing at the tragedy of it, because a lot of people in the room were getting frustrated. They're like, we're here to learn and you're not teaching us how can we succeed with it? And him and I are like, this is just kind of funny at this point. And I was just, I don't know, we're just like looking at the lighter side, like, okay, whatever, it is what it is. And it turns out that he was the only or one of the only retail store owners in that room who wasn't on the panel. I didn't know that at first. And at the end, he ended up asking me, hey, I realized like I'm in this room where we're supposed to teach these designers what to do, and I actually have like the ability to help. So I want to offer you the opportunity to come into this room, like a suite, and pitch to 30 retailers. I'm like, are you serious? Like,
That's crazy. Yeah.
okay.
Just so casually
did-
too.
No preparation. I didn't even have a booth at Gamma. I was just there to watch. And so I had a t-shirt with a QR code on the back. I had Derek redirect that QR code to like a wholesale priced website where they could just buy it immediately. I brought games with me. When I walked into the suite, a lady was pitching before me. She had like a computer. She had a PowerPoint presentation. She had a nice dress on. She looked perfect, like very professional. And I come in with my backpack, like, and I'm like, so guys, I don't have any of that, but I have my game. Can we like pull this desk into the middle of the room and you can just play it and see if you like it?
That's
and this
amazing.
is part of the personal. It's like part of the personal brand is like fun. I want people to laugh and smile and have fun, and that went well. We sold like 300 games in 10 minutes or something. It was crazy.
Yeah, that was so awesome to watch that.
That was crazy. and then what the lady who was pitching before me ran into her in the elevator later. We're like, oh, we know each other. We were in that same room. And it turns out she was too tired to go and do game night. So she gave me her table, and I got 2 tables, which were like $400 a night per table. I'm like, sick. So then I got to demo all night. And like that was a result of just putting yourself out there. Trust me, I didn't feel comfortable doing any of those things. I was super nervous. I did not want to do that. But by putting myself into these situations and allowing myself to be vulnerable and just sharing what matters to me is like have fun and networking, like bridging the brand and the network together, it led to a lot of success. And I do think that is also paired with luck, being in the right place at the right time. You can't only have luck. Like you also need to have the other things with luck too. So that's kind of what I'm leaning into with that. Sorry, rant. Okay, done. Would
you consider that your most successful moment leveraging your personal brand?
I think so.
There, and none of it was supposed to happen.
I think so, because when people think of personal brand, they're like, oh yeah, the girl with the purple hair and the girl with like that music that comes out front and the girl with like those things. No, I again, back to what I said in the beginning, I think personal brand is how you make people feel. I think that in those situations, I made people feel like I was just genuine, like I'm not selling shit, like if you want, like just have a good time. And I think that leading with that in my personal brand is, and because it was authentic, I wasn't forcing that. I wasn't like changing myself to be somebody else, just being me. I think that led to like a snowball effect of really good, really helpful situations. Like, I mean, we mentioned talking about some other stuff later, so I won't dive into it too much now, but it's like being on a TV show. People think, looking at my social media, like, oh, you've made it now. Oh, you've been on a TV show. You've been on Netflix. Like, how did that change your life? I'm like, actually, it didn't change my life, like, at all. Like, I made no money from it. It was literally, it was just fun. And it might be a sense of credibility to some people who care about it. But I wouldn't say that, like, being on those things made my personal brand. It just helped maybe, like, elevate it in a way. But personal brand, I think, is how you make people feel.
Yeah, and that goes back to the whole, it's just raw. Like, right, you're just there. I'm just me. Here's my game. Let's put it in the center. Half the time, those pitches are the best pitches because you're not expecting this crazy, nothing against the lady before you, but it's like, oh, what the expectations are kind of like starting here. And then the fact that you're just you and, hey, I'm just going to sell you my game because this is fun and this is what I love. Well, they start to get into that. It's almost like you just hooked them. And now they're like, oh, now I'm immersed into this brand. This person seems awesome. I want to work with her. Right.
So the games must be fun. If you're fun, the games must be fun. Right.
Yeah.
And I think, too, tying it specifically to tabletop again, think about your target market. Okay. Yes, they own game stores. So, yes, they are business people. But I guarantee you, most of these people did not start a board game store because they're a businessman or a businesswoman. They started it probably because they like tabletop games. How are those people when they're hanging out with their friends playing a game? Talk
Think
to
about
them
where
like
they
that.
started. Yeah.
Like I can't tell you sitting with some of the store owners at Gamma, and like I don't mean this in a condescending way, it's just an observation, is I would see several people come up, and because you have badges, so you know who's a designer, who's a publisher, who's a retail store owner, and they'd come up and be like, "Hey, do you have a minute?" They'd be like, "Yeah," and they'd sit, and then they just give the pitch. And it was just like a cold pitch. There was no warm up into it. There's no friendship building. There was no any
just
of that.
business, and that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But and the irony is that a lot of them didn't have the business knowledge either. So it's like, cool, who's your target market? Who are you selling this to? Any of the business questions about it, the answers weren't there either. So I think it's really helpful to just, obviously you want to have boundaries, but lead more with like just
like that relationship building, right? Like
yeah.
lean into it a little bit early on and don't just jump right into the nitty gritty, because that's going to be it's the gatekeeper thing all over again. We have to surpass that whole, we can converse before we get into buying stuff. We are someone inside of our business as well. And we just want to talk to you.
I don't just want your money. Like
yeah, we don't just, we do, but we don't. We also want to talk. What would you consider then are some common mistakes people make when trying to build their personal brand, and how can they avoid them?
Okay, so I've been an entrepreneur for a long time, from like dance studio to events companies to board games and that. And so I've had several friends, acquaintances along the way be like, I want to build a business. I'm like, sick, you should do it. And the ones that do take action, most of the time, I see them go to the, okay, let me buy the domain. Let me get the website. Let me figure out my brand colors. Let me figure out all of like the name of the company. Literally none of that matters if you can't get traction in the other areas. So in business, the traction is the sale. Like literally just go get whatever you're selling, just go get a sale first and then build your website.
Yeah.
Like see if you have a business first before you deal with all of the costs. And I do think there's a parallel with just the personal brand, where it's easy to get caught up the semantics. And I guess that's like redundant to the things that I've been saying already, but like just know who you are. Just know who you are and like double down on that. Don't try to be who you're not.
Yeah, I like what you said about having your product first before doing all that fancy stuff. Like I was saying before, finding the purpose. You know, maybe your purpose is, hey, I have a game that I want to pitch. Before you get your website, put the game up there, you start playtesting like crazy. Well, make an MVP, is what we call it, minimum viable product. Just go find some people, see if they would even be interested in it. Come up with a theme, come up with something. You know, you don't have to go that way, but that's an easy way to be like, hey, this is a product, will it sell? Well, think about the market and product market before you do all of the work that comes with making the thing.
And it might change, and it's okay if it changes. So I think that's enough. Going on that is another mistake, is just taking too long to be perfect. Like just go get your hands dirty. Just go make stuff. Let it build it upon itself. And I think that's the most organic way to build the brand, is like let it build upon itself.
Yeah, you have to Shia LaBeouf sometimes. You have to just do it, right?
Do it! Just do it! Yesterday, you said tomorrow. So just do it! Make your dreams come true!
Shia LaBeouf? I've literally never heard that.
Oh no, you need to look this up afterwards, because if you don't know that, wow. Oh my goodness, I can't believe this.
Should I have not admitted that? Like, just cut that?
Don't worry, I will keep this in the podcast. I'm gonna ask this final question, because I think this will wrap it up really nicely. What advice then would you give someone who is just starting building their personal brand in the tabletop industry specifically?
Just do more content. Just do more content until you figure out more of what you like, what you don't like, what works well, what doesn't work well, what feels good to you, what doesn't feel good to you. Think less about it and just do more of it. Because
and that's not specifically
really
game design, right? You're saying don't make more games necessarily, but make more content around your products.
Yeah. I mean, both really. Because like part of your personal brand might be learning like what games you really like making. Like Derek and I started off with light strategy games, and I'm like, that's our brand. We actually led with mental health around it, and now I'm like, I don't want to do that at all. And now our brand's nothing to do with that, and my brand's nothing to do with that. So it can be in many ways. And I think that's why I said, like, just go get your hands dirty. Like, don't overthink stuff. Just do more things. And I mean, I can't speak for the American school system. I imagine it's probably similar here in Canada. Like, we're very much valued on getting closer to 100%. And it's like you sharpen your sword, and then like you just get one shot. And what's your grade? And now, cool, if you got 90-something%, like, you're smart. You're going to have a good career path ahead of you. Whereas if you got 50%, like, you're a failure. You're probably, you're not going to do real well in life. What if we started valuing getting 50% 100 times more? And like, you just, like, if you have this, rather than just like waiting until you shoot that dart one time to get it perfect in the bullseye, like, just throw 1,000 of them and just like get better.
You'll get
faster,
one of them,
right? You'll just get, guaranteed. If you throw 1,000 of them, you're gonna get closer by like the 900th one,
Right.
And you're gonna learn about yourself, and you're gonna learn about what you like and what you don't like, and your brand is gonna become more authentic because you've done so many reps that you just know what feels good to you. And then you can start adding spice to it, whether that spice is like music or colors or certain styles of things. But you're going to learn, do I want to make more party games? Do I want to make like judge-based party games? Do I want to make a variety of them? Do I want to do like recurring revenue game night boxes? Like, you learn all of that sort of stuff, and your business model can even come as a result of just doing those reps. So I think whether it be tabletop games or something else, just getting your hands dirty like way more frequently.
My advice is, I was talking about the fear thing earlier. Just put yourself out there and don't be afraid for the rejection. Because I know game designers especially, again, I keep going back just game designers because that's kind of where I'm from, right? Game designers specifically, they are going to wait for that rejection letter, but they're going to be so sad about it. They're going to be so mad about it when we can't think about that. We have more ways to go. Like, there's more paths around those rejection letters. Just because we don't get one or, one success out of every 15 rejections, you have a success now. Just focusing on there is a right path, and anything you do is not wrong. You just have to adapt and feel free to put yourself out there. Like you said, make more content. It doesn't have to be the most professional content. It doesn't have to be on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook. Make a piece of content that you think they will find value, and put value first. Don't put the sale first. Put the value first.
Yes.
So,
why should they watch you? Like, why should they spend their quality time on you? And
exactly.
And not just that, but like, analyze. Don't just put 1,000 pieces out and not reflect, and just keep doing the same shit stuff over and over and over and over again. Like, reflect. Like, look at your stuff. What are the patterns? What are the trends? Like, why aren't people? Sometimes you need to put something out 100 times before it clicks. But maybe after the 100th time, if it's still not clicking, like, what do you need to adapt? What do you need to change? I mean, I came from the dance industry, which is like high rejection. You go to auditions and competitions, and everything is being judged, whether you're auditioning or competing. Everything is judged. And then now in the board game industry, everything is judged, whether you're trying to pitch a game to a publisher, or you're trying to sell your game on Amazon, or whatever the method is, or you're trying to get views on TikTok. Everything is judged. And you do need to have a thick skin. But I think 99% of people are not born with thick skin. I think it's something that you grow. And I don't mean to give like a visceral, gross image with that, but like, you need to just do it more and feel the hurt feelings until you just realize that it doesn't matter that much. Because like you said, Devon, like, if you put 15 things out, or you put one thing out and you get rejected, like, it kind of hurts. But if you're like, no, I'm just going to keep on going, and switch the mindset that I'm just going to keep going, and I'm going to do more, like, eventually you get wins. And the more you do it and the longer you do it, the better you get. So the more wins you will get over time. So I think it's just, if I were to bring it down to one thing, is just be resilient. Don't be so quick to quit on things, and don't be afraid to take the risk. A lot of people don't succeed because they're literally just too afraid to try, or they're just too afraid to try again. I think that's one of the biggest differences, is like, just be willing to try, and be willing to try again. It will separate you from the masses.
Yeah, and that is going to close out our main topic for today. We hope you guys learned a lot about branding yourself, or just had some insights about what a personal brand means. And that was kind of our goal with this podcast. But we always do something in our podcast called The Beyond. And we're going to talk a little bit about something outside the board game industry that we're excited about. I'm going to go first. You mentioned Squid Game. You were a part of a Netflix show called Squid Game. And I just need to know, what was that process like? Like, what was your experience like? And how did you leverage your brand while filming that?
It feels so weird because we filmed it so long ago.
Yeah.
I'm like bringing myself back there. I think I will, to tie it back, like, because there's a lot of things I could talk about, but to tie it back to be relevant to what we've been dialing in is the fear of putting yourself out there. It's one thing to put yourself out there on like one TikTok video or like a couple TikTok videos or YouTube or whatever. It's another thing to be like, okay, I'm going to go on Netflix.
A reality TV show kind of
It's
thing
a little
on
like
Netflix.
more risky, you know?
Yeah.
And not knowing, I mean, I didn't get big talking roles or like I
Mhm.
wasn't a feature on there, but you don't know who's going to be a feature. It's reality TV. You might
Right.
not. And so I actually had like a lot of calls with my mom and my dad and my closest friends who I could trust, because we had to be very secretive about going on it pre-production
Right.
and for the gear, waiting for it to come out. Thinking about, you know, what if I get a lot of what if I do go far? What if I get a lot of attention? Like, how is that going to go? And going into like overthinking everything. Like my dad, for instance, he was a jockey, like a horse racing jockey, and he was very well known out here in Vancouver, but like not everybody liked him because people don't always like the number one, right?
Mhm.
And it's like, okay, well, how's that going to relate? Like how big will this be? And my mind kind of started like thinking beyond the reality of it all and thinking of the worst case situations and like what of my past could get brought up. It's not like I have a crazy bad past or anything, but I'm like, am I ready in the worst case or best case, whatever, to be exposed in like whatever possible area there is?
Mhm.
And I had to really think deeply, like, do I want people to know my life? Because right now I can control what I post. Nobody really cares. Like, it's just random posts here and there. They're not like researching or media or anything like
Mhm.
that. And so deciding to go on a Netflix show, not knowing if it would go far or not, I had to kind of make those decisions. And I ended up deciding I chose to apply for this because if it were to turn out well, it would be a really good chance to build my brand for my game company. It's a game show.
Mhm.
So I'm just going to do it. Like, I'm willing to, like, out of weighing the pros and the cons of my fears versus the possible positive outcomes, I'm like, I will do it. And then going forward and doing it, it was just a really surreal experience because they take away all of your day-to-day normal things. Like, you have no
Mhm.
phone, no TV, no clock, no fresh air, no sunshine.
God, that's crazy.
Literally nothing. Literally
Yeah.
nothing. You have nothing. You have your tracksuit and your bed and water and people. Strangers.
Strangers, yep.
Hundreds of them, all in one room. And if you can't sleep from noise, like, good luck.
Yeah, I'm out.
Luckily,
I can't do it.
I had Dr. Rick, one of the players, the old man, like below and in front of me. So I had the joys of hearing him snore many hours of the night. And then like they put like fluorescent lights in there too,
Yeah.
so you're kind of just feeling dazed,
Mhm.
and it really messes with your point of mind after a couple of days. And they leave you for a couple of days, like you're just in there for, I think it was 3 or 4 days before we even did
Wow.
a game. Trust me, time goes slow in that environment.
Oh my
But
goodness.
it was still fun. But some people didn't find it fun. Some people quit. They're like, I can't
Mhm.
handle this. I'm like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
I ended up doing Battleship, which is super ironic because that is a board game. Yeah.
We'll leave it
there's
at
lots of
that.
things I
You
could talk
can go
about, but-
watch Netflix,
Yeah.
the Squid Game show, and I still remember. I think I messaged you as soon as I saw that episode, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is the coolest thing ever!" Like, I saw you on Netflix, and it was just like so surreal that like now we're talking face to face, and you were on the TV, and it was pretty cool, and it was a great show.
You're
so
next. You should apply. Watch, like, lo and behold, you did apply, and you're already casted. And
I
don't even
actually
know.
did. Well, now let's. What do you have for us? Something outside that you're excited about?
That I'm excited about.
Yeah.
I got one. No,
Okay.
I want to talk about because we're both starting a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I am excited to do that, but I'm kind of learning along the way and failing forward as I always do. I'm actually just curious to know more about you and like what made you finally, I don't know if you talk about this on other episodes or not, but what made you kind of bite it off, and like if you can give me a little spiel on your experience on getting started with that.
I talked about it a little bit in the beginning episode, the welcome episode, but I've always wanted to do a podcast, and I wanted to do it with the board game hype at first, but then it was a little too much in just the game design route, and Board Game Design Lab was already out there. So I didn't want to just do the game design stuff. I knew Mark Street of the Dice Tower for a bit. We've been kind of close for a bit. And I was like, Mark, you have a good voice for, the film. And I knew he was good on video because he does it all the time. I was like, let's just do this. And he's like, yeah, I've been wanting to do another podcast for a long time. I knew going into this that it was going to be a ton of work on me because I'm doing all the editing and all of the everything outside of the recording. But I was just like, I want to just do it, have another avenue that I can talk about things and interview people, talk about things like this that'll help people, like branding yourself.
Yeah.
That is not a topic you're necessarily going to see on other tabletop channels. And I think this is really crucial for the tabletop industry to make us better designers, publishers, podcast hosts, you know, all the things.
Yeah.
So,
you know what? There's a book that I just love, and it's a business book called The Hard Thing About the Hard Things. And this podcast kind of reminds me of that, because there's other podcasts like similar to going to business school. You're going to learn how to do accounting, marketing, all of the basics for running a business. But then there's the other stuff that they don't teach you that happens in between that affects your whole business. Cultural stuff, just things that you don't know, or things that are just not in the curriculum. Stuff like this, where we're talking about personal brand. And I imagine other topics that you're bringing into here is going to be kind of the equivalent of that, but for the board game industry, which is pretty cool. And I'm really happy to be a part of too.
Yeah, and that's why I really wanted to say beyond the box. Like when we were originally talking about the brand, I was like, well, we could just do, you know, board game hype. But then I was like, let's do something different. And then Mark was like, oh, let's talk about rolling. I was like, okay, cool. And then let's reflect. I was like, let's do is open it up a little bit, reflect on things, and not just be about the industry.
Right.
Let's talk about what's behind the scenes, what's beyond the box. And so that's where it all comes out, right? Is we can talk about literally anything within the industry, specific games, but I also wanted to talk about things that are outside of the box. Game design, publishers, how do you design prototype? I really love that I was able to open it up like that. So thank you so much for jumping onto this podcast. This has been awesome. And thank you all for listening to these podcasts. We really appreciate you. And of course, subscribe and hit that like button and notification to know when we release other videos here on YouTube. Follow our show at social media at Roll and Reflect and Roll and Reflect Podcast. And then, of course, special shout outs to Scott for our reflection question and Laura for doing timestamps. And of course, Darylle for being an awesome guest. We really appreciate you on. And then the final thing I have to do is tease the next episode. In next week's episode, Mark and I will be talking about Getting Wild. Terrific trio of tiny all-play games with big adventures. Very excited about that. Darylle, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you for having me. I had a good time.
And until next time, we'll see you at the table.